Okay, friends, welcome back to our online Bible study, looking at the Gospel of John. And today we are going to start looking at this week the second part of John chapter 5. So here's what you got. You got what we looked at last week, which is a story about Jesus healing that man at Bethsaida. And then you've got like a little transitional statement that we're talking about today. And then you've got Jesus giving a long monologue. And I will tell you, the stories are way more fun to teach and to preach out of, but a lot of the punches the Gospel of John packs are actually in these long monologues of Jesus. They help us to understand why what just happened matters, why it mattered then, and why it matters today. So we're going to spend the next 4 days, beginning tomorrow, really looking at that monologue. But today I want to really look at this transitional statement, which is just verse 18. For today, we're also reading through 19 through 24. I'm going to come back to that stuff later in the week. I really just want to take a look at verse 18 today. This was why the Jews, and remember, whenever we see the Jews here, this is not referring to all Jewish people, okay? It's very, 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 very important. I wish that these translations translated it differently. It's really more like the Judeans, which is the people who live in that region, and likely it's referring to just the religious leaders. It's just a handful of people. This is not the Jews as a whole. Couldn't possibly be more important. This was why the Jewish leaders, the Judeans, were seeking all the more to what? Kill him, which is Jesus. Why are they trying to kill him? Well, a couple reasons. Because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, that's reason number one, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal to God. That's number two. A second one is way more dangerous. It's blasphemy, and we will be talking more about that. But this whole Sabbath breaking thing is a big deal also. So it leads us to the question, is Jesus a lawbreaker? I mean, he definitely does things that make people uncomfortable, that pushes the boundaries. When we talk about the law, we don't mean like the civil law. Is he a civil lawbreaker? But is he a breaker of the Old Testament law? I mean, he's a good and a faithful Jew. Is he running around breaking the Old Testament law? I think what's underneath here is actually really, really important. So you've got in the Old Testament law, in the covenant, which Jesus follows as a good, faithful Jew, you've got all kinds of laws and restrictions around the Sabbath. And what's the purpose of the Sabbath? The Sabbath was Saturday, the seventh day of the week. Sunday is the first day of the week for the Jews. You rest on the Sabbath because God rested on the Sabbath. And God just knows that his people need that routine of rest once every 7 days. It's a gift that God gives to his people. Okay, so that's why you have it. And then in the law, again, you have restrictions about what you can and cannot do. But the Jews take that so seriously that what has happened over time is that in addition to the actual rules that are found in the scriptures, in the law, they have built around those rules like a fence almost. Picture it that way. With all kinds of other traditions that have been established saying, we want to make sure that we don't break the actual law. So we're going to have other kind of restrictions around the actual law so that we don't even get close to breaking it. I mean, it would be like if there is something that you don't want your kids to touch in one part of your house, like on a particular bookshelf. If the rule is don't touch that thing, then you may say, I know my kids are going to push it a little bit further, so I'm going to say you can't even go in this like region, right? You can't even go in this room. So you've got the actual law, and then you've got that around it so that people don't even get close to it. I haven't studied this myself, I've read that there were 39 of these additional rules that had come up to put around the law itself. And one of those additional rules was that you can't carry stuff. So, what is it that Jesus is breaking here? What it seems to be is that Jesus is not breaking the actual Torah. He is not breaking the actual law, what is actually in the scripture. He is breaking the norms and kind of the cultural expectations that have arisen around the law. And these Jewish leaders do not like that. But he doesn't break the law himself because he is a good and a faithful Jew. And part of what I think Jesus is pushing at is, look, here's the deal. Here's the deal. The purpose of the Sabbath and all of God's law is to actually set us free. It's a good gift. It's a good blessing. And we have built all kinds of things around it that are well-intentioned. But those well-intentioned things can be used in ways that are actually not helpful to people, but can actually be limiting in our ability to fully live our lives with God and with other people. Those 39 things are intended to be good, and most of the time they are used for good, but they can actually become a stumbling block. I'm going to say some things that are the antithesis of the way that I typically teach and the way that I typically live out my own discipleship of Jesus. I think that it is very important to have routine and to have discipline in our lives, but it is also possible for the routine and the discipline that we build into our lives to become something that we end up worshiping on our own. I think the first 15 is very important. You know that. But if we begin to worship our first 15 as if we do our first 15, we're great, and if we don't do our first 15, we're in big, big trouble. If we begin to think that only people who do their first 15 are like living the right way, and people who don't do their first 15 to live in the wrong way, then we've made the first 15, which is supposed to be something that blesses us, into something that can actually become a stumbling block for us. This can be true with fasting. It can be true with our prayer routine. It can be true with our service. It can be true with any of those things. Look, the point is that those things are intended to be things that bring us, that point us towards God, that are like the path between us and God, that connect us. But when those things become the things, then they can become troublesome. So let me just ask you, I think this is where we need to be today. Are there any of your spiritual practices that can become a stumbling block for you? Meaning that you feel like you have to do it. You become judgmental when you do it and other people don't. I mean, this is all about, and this whole month has been about, like those encounters with Jesus, about that personal relationship with God. How are your disciplines helping with that? And is it possible that, like these Jewish leaders, that sometimes the traditions that you have, the routines that you have, can actually become a stumbling block? Give that some thought, friends. God bless you, and I'll see you later this week.